Hello, and welcome to Hey Boomer. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And Hey Boomer is the podcast where we go beyond the surface, exploring the complexities of family relationships, maintaining our health, navigating caregiving, coping with divorce or widowhood, and embracing new relationships. It's the podcast that acknowledges the challenges and the opportunities that come with aging with a compassionate and realistic approach. So, our show today is about long distance caregiving, but I don't really have experience with long distance caregiving. So, I pulled together some from some notes that I found on the internet. An excerpt from a woman named Carolyn Shepherd that she wrote in the caregiver space. So, some of what she said was, how can we be the most effective advocate for our family member when we're long distance? Do we have the practical knowledge regarding everything from where they do their banking to whether or not they have a do not resuscitate or a living will? Carolyn's own feelings of guilt from being away when she was needed was one of her biggest challenges. It was also excruciatingly difficult to leave her family members in a hospital, in nursing home, or in hospice care when it was time for her to return back home. She tried her best to make what felt like a lose-lose situation into a win-win. But she said it forever felt like she had one foot in and one foot out when it came to being at home or being with her loved one. Like so many of us, she tried to be a hero at first. She took her role as caregiver very seriously, and she wanted to master the twists and turns and do it all by herself. And she learned the hard way this wasn't realistic. She felt she was bothering people when she needed support or simply wanted to rage about her frustrations. What helped her the most was accepting and understanding that her feelings were normal. She learned that taking breaks was necessary, warranted, and okay. Even when she couldn't be there, she checked in daily with family members and the staff caring for them. And her calls let those caring for her family know that she was concerned and vested in their well-being, even when she wasn't there. Our guest today, Ellen Belk, lived through a long-distance caregiving experience with her father. This experience changed the trajectory of Ellen's career. There is so much that we can learn from her and that I know we're going to. So be sure to share your questions in the chat as they arise and share this episode with your friends, anyone that you know who is a caregiver from a long distance or who may become a caregiver from a long distance. Our topic today, long distance caregiving, is the perfect segue into our new sponsor, CareLink 360. So if you're a long distance caregiver and you want to connect face-to-face with your loved one, the digital health companion from CareLink 360 is a safe, secure, and easy-to-use device that fosters regular social interactions. In addition, and this is part of why I got so excited about this product, CareLink 360 can provide over 400 health and wellness modules. They talk about things like the different disease states, the patient's interests. They have games that go along with their capabilities. They include tools for brain and body fitness, exercise programs, speech improvement skills, cognitive, physical, and occupational skill development. They also have reminders for medications, activities that are crucial for the well-being of your loved one. It's easy to set up, It's designed, I love this part too, it's designed for the hearing and visually impaired, touchscreen navigation, so they don't have to be afraid of the technology, and it operates in a safe, secure, private, and encrypted network. I bought one for my mom, and so I am excited to let you know more about their experiences with it as we start to use it. So go to mycarelink360.com/ref, REF/boomer to learn more. And when you're ready to purchase, enter the word boomer, all in lowercase, at checkout to get an additional 5% off your purchase. I will put that link in the show notes. And one more thing before I bring Ellen on. You know that Road Scholar is my favorite way to travel. Last year, I took an amazing trip with Road Scholar to Costa Rica. And then I took my youngest grandson on a Windjammer cruise off the coast of Maine. It was fantastic. The food on every trip is amazing. The guides are so knowledgeable. Everything is taken care of. I love traveling with Road Scholar. This summer, we're going on a trip to Quebec. So I'll be glad to tell you all about that once we do that. They are the not-for-profit leader in educational travel for boomers and beyond. And they have travel opportunities to all 50 states and over 100 countries. So go to roadscholar.org/heyboomer. And you got to put the /heyboomer so that they know that you heard about it from our show. All right, let me bring Ellen on and do a brief introduction. Hello, my friend.
Hello.
So glad you could join us today.
I want to go on a trip right now after that.
I know. You got to come with us on our next trip.
That sounds like a great organization.
Oh, it's
and of course, CareLink 360, who I'm a fan of as well.
I know you know them too. Yeah. So Ellen Belk has 20 plus years of operational experience in senior housing as a holistic dementia expert, author, trainer, and influencer. And boy, is she an influencer. She has got so much information on her website and on LinkedIn. Ellen is a dynamic speaker, a recognized expert in aging and dementia care. She's the founder of the KIM Academy, which stands for Keep in Mind, KIM, which is an online dementia education platform. She was a long-distance caregiver for her dad, and now her mom is living close by, so she is what I guess I would call a close caregiver for her mom. So no one better to share the challenges and tips for providing the best care possible when you don't live close by. That would be you, Miss Ellen.
Oh, yes.
So tell me how this journey started. I mean, you were not in this business when your dad got sick.
No. Well, and actually, I always kind of, and I've written about where I kind of start with when I got the call in the year 2000. However, as I was getting ready and kind of ruminating about being on with your tribe, I was impacted in 1996. My dad needed to have a hip replacement in 1996. I was in the process I was working in radio. I have a radio background, and I had been working for many years in the radio industry in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I'm born and raised. And but I was leaving the Milwaukee market to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, to work in radio there. And my mom and dad were both, my dad wasn't even 70 at that point. But they were both scheduled to kind of drive cross country. I was going to drive the moving truck, but he couldn't. It turned out to have to be my mom and I alone, because my dad had that hip, that was the first surgery in 1996, was a full hip replacement. And so he just wasn't cleared by his doctor at that point to drive. So I didn't give it much thought. I was embarking onto this next new life. I went to Charlotte. I was working in media there, and I was there for about 13 months. And I got an opportunity to then continue my career in New York. But So, but there was that first thing that really showed that I have an aging parent. And at that moment in 96, it was like, oh, shoot, plans have to be altered and dad can't come. But it really wasn't until 2000. Now I'm living in New York for several years at this point, and I get the phone call that, and I had just spoken to my mom and dad just a couple days earlier as we catch up. I'm their youngest of five. I'm the youngest child of five. And I was kind of raised as an only child, to be quite frank. My four older siblings were all boomers. I'm an older Gen Xer, but I am a Gen Xer. So I'm younger than them, but I'm not a millennial so, by any stretch. So we were raised Catholic. So I was kind of like a Catholic oopsie. I came like more than 11 years after the youngest that's above me. And then the other three go up from there. So I really was, when I was in third grade, my older siblings were all in college. They were all out of the house. So I really was raised like an only child. And I had a very, very different experience growing up than all these four that had to struggle and share everything. And I was a latchkey kid. Mom went back to work. So all of that to say, I had a very close relationship with my parents. And when I got that phone call, just a couple days after in 2000 that I had just spoken to them 2 days earlier, they told me they had their bowling league. They were going to their bowling league that night, the night that I was speaking to them. Well, 2 days later, I get a phone call that dad had been rushed to the emergency room from a scheduled stress test. I did know that he was having a stress test 2 days after the bowling. It was just trying to stay in charge of his health. It wasn't experiencing any issues, but he needed that. Ultimately, that resulted in a quintuple heart bypass surgery.
Oh my gosh.
So shizzle got real at that point. And I'm in Long Island, New York. They're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My siblings were, I guess, I wasn't super close with them even in my New York days, but they were in the general vicinity, but there wasn't really huge relationships at that point. So honey, I'm on a one-way flight as fast as I could get to it. I had to drop everything. And in those days, I was speaking for a living. I had to cancel 4 speaking engagements of that week. With my income, and so you just don't think about it. But when I look back, it's like, oh man, that, it impacted me financially, obviously, but you don't think about that. And I ended up taking a one-way flight at that point, and I was home in Milwaukee for 10 days. And then I ended up booking the return. He got, cleared from the surgery. I took him to several post-op appointments. My mom was there, but now at this point, I think my mom was 80 and he was like 79. We're not young they're not young anymore. And even the compression socks that he had to wear, she couldn't get him on at first. So it really, in those moments, you're kind of on adrenaline.
Yeah.
But then when the dust clears, you realize like, okay, here we are. We're in it.
Okay. So I have to ask you, you were in radio, right? You didn't have a healthcare background, and suddenly you're doing this caregiving 10 days there and then wondering and worrying what you need to do. Could you even be prepared? Like, what did you feel like you needed to know right away?
I got to tell you, in that first, at this moment, I was just on adrenaline. Do you realize that in those 10 days I was home? And again, this isn't to bash, but I know you did talk about in your opening that there are family dynamics. You talk about that on this show, just in general, whatever that looks like. Well, I never really thought I had family dynamics until I'm home in Wisconsin. And I'm the only one that lives out of state. And I'm there for 10 days. And it wasn't literally, Wendy, it wasn't until I got back to New York, 10, 11 days later. And I realized, like, I never saw my siblings. Our dad just had quintuple heart bypass. I never saw them. So They knew I was in town.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It didn't resonate at that moment that had all happened and I was really alone. One of the things that my mom and I, and to this day, my mom and I, we work well together. We complement each other from a personal perspective. I am the mini me of my mom. So in that original instance, it was just like she and I, all hands on deck. And she was, of course, she was probably scared witless. This is her husband of, ultimately at the end of my dad's life, they were married 62 years. So we were, we were on the front end of that. In 2000, his life journey ultimately ended in 2016 because so many other things. The caregiving just never. There was that lax between 96 to 2000, but from 2000 to 2016, it was game on.
Wow.
Just other things kept. He ended up having from 1996, which I said was the hip replacement, to 2014. So that was 2010. There was, in that 14-year time span, he had 10 surgeries from hip to another hip to aneurysm to the heart, obviously, 10 surgeries under full anesthetic. So there's a thing that I'd like to say to adult children. Whatever the situation is, as our older adults in our life, whether it's parents, grandparents, whoever it is, lovely aunt that we love, whatever, as they start to have more and more under full anesthesia surgeries. Now, that's a thing. You can have, local and all that, but I'm talking, you're knocked out, you got anesthesia. It can, and in our instance, it absolutely did. It can not bode well for you in the long run cognitively. I'll just leave it at that for right now.
Yeah. So what did you were leaving back to New York. What did you feel like you needed to know right away or get in place right away before you left?
Well, the food had to change. So we cleared out the cat. I mean, it's not like they were awful, but they're Midwestern, Dad liked his ice cream, they're a silent generation, they're the younger end of the greatest generation, both my mom and my dad. So, and they were in Wisconsin, so there was lots of meat, lots of cheese, and lots of ice cream. And it always had been kind of a joke at how Dad liked ice cream, and so here we are. So I had to, and I when I look back, I did a lot of grocery shopping. We reached that one of the post-op appointments was his new cardiologist. Now he's got a cardiologist. So I met him in person, got all the, the other thing I will say, that if you're like me and you knew you're going to get on a plane, I did have the wherewithal to know that I needed to be on I needed to be able to call. I needed to get on in that doctor's office. They needed to be able to give me information because I wasn't going to be there all the time. I knew that instinctively, weirdly, who knows how. Now as a person on the inside, I've been on the inside of healthcare now. I recommend that to any adult child. Get the clearance at any doctor. I don't even care if it's at a podiatrist that your loved one sees. Be sure that your name is on that end so that you can call, and they've got you listed as someone that can have their information, get information if you're not around. So I was able to do that with this cardiologist, got to know the nurses in this visit. We had several appointments in that 10 days that I was there, at least 2. So changing the food, because he had given us a whole laundry list of stuff. And at this point, I think my mom was a little overwhelmed. She was just trying to make sense of this. She was probably seeing, what is this future going to look like now? So there was still, this was the hip replacement was a thing, but
right.
Quintuple heart bypass surgery.
It's pretty serious. Yeah.
So it was getting the diet, the food that at least, that needed to be now present, and then they get kind of organized on that and get to know the doctors, at least those immediate ones that he was dealing with predominantly at that moment. I get to know them and let them know this. And we exchange, I had my information. Fast forward to now, here in 2024, now you have like portals. We are not only am I been a long distance caregiver, but we are in active caregiving mode here between my husband and I. Both of his parents we're on, and my mother, we are on the portal. That's how we call it here in the Carolinas. And so we have access to their medical records that we can actually see test results in real time. Back in the old days, do you know that those doctors were mailing me? They were blacking out my dad's name and its information, and they were mailing. I had to wait like 9 days or whatever to get it. But it was what it was at the time, and that's how we navigated it.
Right. But still, to get on the portal, you'll still need the permission.
100%.
Yeah. So that's great advice. Thank you for that. So you had mentioned to me that you also took time kind of making their home safe for them now that they were getting older. So what did you know to do about that?
Well, the me coming home in 2000. So the surgery was in April, and I was there, as I said, in April, and then I went back, obviously, after those 10 days. Well, I still was a citizen. So that was 2000. I was still a citizen of New York on 9/11 of 2001, and I was in the broadcast industry. The show that I had been co-hosting at that time in New York had been canceled. Another side story, on Christmas Eve of 2000. So on Christmas Eve, we're told this is your last night on the air. Yay. So Merry Christmas to me.
Merry Christmas, right?
Yeah. So I already was navigating that. Now I was still getting, some compensation because I was under a contract. But that being said, when 9/11 happened, several months later, I was unemployed. I was always working. I was always a hustler, but I wasn't full-time with benefits in any way for about 6 months when that incident occurred. It was then, Wendy, that I transitioned. I had my aha moment. Like, this has been great. New York has been awesome. I was a fish to water there, make no mistake. But it also, I had stuff going on at home, and now the world is collapsing. I needed to recalibrate. So I did go back home to Wisconsin. I actually lived with my parents for a little while until I bought my condo. But it was then, Wendy, that I transitioned into healthcare. There's a lot more to that. I didn't know what I didn't know. I just knew I didn't want to go back in radio because my radio career had started in Milwaukee. And now when you work in New York, you kind of become like you don't want to work anywhere else. I know that we have that, probably that attribute. But that being said, it was bigger than that, though. Life just felt really real to me for all the reasons, just what was happening in my familial life, but also in the world environment. I had lived through that, and I was bruised. I had been in the city, so I was bruised. But anyway, that being said, I did land, interestingly enough. Took a little while, but I ended up landing in a skilled nursing center. I didn't know what I didn't know. I just needed to work. I did want to go into healthcare. I did, in my mind, I'm a communicator. I was published in New York. I just felt like, well, I can craft a message. I would make a great hospital spokesperson. I believed all that. Yeah, nobody believed that. So for months, I got PR, interviews and marketing, because again, big personality, big voice. But I was just trying to land somewhere, and I ultimately landed in skilled nursing, which then led to adult day, which then, as I'm growing now in Milwaukee in healthcare, and I ended up landing with Ascension Health. They weren't called Ascension then, but they are now. And I landed at one of their largest at that time, what we call a continuing care retirement community, everything from independent houses on like 40 acres of land to end of life nursing home, and everything in between, assisted living, memory support, and adult day. So I got a great opportunity in the 3 years that I worked there. So I tell you all of that because now I am back in Milwaukee. I am now in senior living, and I'm getting a foothold there. And it was with that job with Ascension, which is where I picked a lane. I finally was picking a lane now, and it was dementia. And so they back in those days when they invested in your success, unlike our current climate. But I was sent to continuing education credits because here again I was a college graduate, but I didn't know anything from anything about dementia or anything.
Right.
So, but they believed in me. They believed that I was coming in with and I was starting to make inroads. I was having the creativeness. See, this is where, from a senior living perspective, I always tell my senior housing providers who have now turned into my clients as a consultant, but don't turn your back on people that don't speak healthcare, because so many of us, as long there's some certain qualities that you can bring into the industry, like I had creativity and this no fear attitude.
Okay, so but let's get back to
I'm sorry.
the
So
long distance care, right? The long
so
distance
I
care.
was
So what do you need to do when you're not there? You're traveling back and forth. What do you need to do to make sure your parents are, or your older sibling or aunts are getting the care they need?
Well, I apologize. I went off on a tangent.
It's okay.
I did stay in Milwaukee for 3 years. I was still about 45 minutes away, but ultimately I did move again. So 17 of my 24 years have been long distance. Let me just put it that way. There was a brief hiccup there while I was local with mom
Right.
and dad. Okay. And so it was in that time that I was now in the industry. So when I then moved away, coming back to the Carolinas, he was in decent shape. We ebbed and flowed. And I did move again, but things really started to get real again around 2010, 2012. The last surgery was an aneurysm, a hernia surgery that turned into him having hallucinations everything went sideways after that. So you're asking me, so I mean, now I'm in the industry though. So I'm in the industry as I've now moved to the Carolinas and I'm working for major people. So I knew to start to build the team. I do see someone in the comments asking if the connection has improved with my siblings. Unfortunately, it has not. Two of my siblings have passed away. That happened during these years. And my two remaining are still back in Wisconsin. And my mom lives here now as of 2020. During the global pandemic, I moved her here. But to what people need to know is
tell me about the team. Like, what kind of team did you need?
Because I wasn't having the familial support, I had to get to know the players around. So for example, they lived in a condo at this point. My parents did. I had the phone numbers, and they had like a roster of people that all lived in this condo. There were two in particular, one on either side of my parents. I let them know, can I please have your phone numbers? I have your phone numbers. Mom's given them to me, but I want you to know that because I'm in South Carolina, you're here. And they were all very aware of what was going on. So there came points where they were bringing food over to my mom and dad. They took when the COVID happened and my dad was gone and my mom was still there, the neighbors were taking her grocery shopping. So that went on for many, many, many years. To this day, I'm still in touch with both of those people.
Oh, that's great.
Still keep track of my mom, who's now long distance. Yeah. Number one. Number two, the team. As my parents are now getting older, my dad was finally diagnosed with Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's at the age of 82. So and my mom was 83. I started to look at the service providers. I knew, and we need to know that if it's an adult spouse, elder spouse caring for another spouse, you guys, the statistics are very, very high that the intact caregiving spouse often passes away first because of the stress, because of the care duties. I was very panicked that now dad has dementia, mom at 82 is caring for him. And where's this going to go? So you should always know about your area agency on aging. Area agency on aging. There is one in every county in this country. You look it up. You find the one that's closest. Just Google area agency on aging and the zip code of where your loved one is. They can tell you about meal delivery, adult day service programs. At that time, they sent me a booklet. So I had the whole binder. There was a car service, which we actually had to use a couple years into this, because we sent dad to an adult day that I found through the area agency on aging. And they had a car service that took him there. So mom could at least get 6 hours of respite on the days that dad went to adult day. And they bathed him at adult day.
Oh, really?
So it was huge, because the bathroom is another place where you don't want your loved ones the highest risk of fall is there. So I was trying to build a team. of providers, of neighbors. I got to know all the new doctors. And so I had them and just stay
Excellent.
in touch with them and involved with them.
Yeah, and I see Maureen asking about elder care attorneys.
100%. Here's the deal on that. When my dad was still with us, I started with financial planner. Very, very good question, Maureen. I started with a financial planner because, interestingly, my dad was the guy managing the finance, the finances.
Right,
So
not unusual.
we started there. It was going to tap into him. I just wanted them to hear. Part of the thing is I didn't want them, you don't want to make decisions in crisis. So I'm telling you that, yes, he was moving slower. Yes, there was a Parkinsonian diagnosis, but he was still very able-bodied. We were still going to the grocery store. He would just use his walker. So you want to put these things in place and make decisions proactively before you're in crisis, because the crisis will come. So we did meet with financial planners. They had, and in doing so, you guys, in doing that, I got a sense of what the financial outlook was. So I knew I started to get a peek behind the curtain as their youngest child, of proud, silent generation people who don't talk about money with their children. I at least had an idea of what we were working with. And then to Maureen's point, it was after my dad passed away. And so now that got in 2016, my mother, who was 87 at the time, now is a widow back in Wisconsin. And I'm still in South Carolina. So I still, for the next 4 years, was long distance with her. But I was able to get her to get an elder law attorney, because now dad is no longer there. And I knew I was going to have some issues with my siblings. And now there's only 3 of us left. And I'm the one that's been heavy lifting for all these years. That elder law attorney thing was amazing, because mom was able, when there's no crisis, she's still very healthy to this day. She was able to make her choices. What goes where? How does this look? How does this get divided? These are my wishes. I'm her power of attorney of both finance and health. She named her secondary, cut and dry. And that's been huge, huge help, to have those things in place when you're not in a crisis situation.
Yeah, I think that is so important. So you mentioned your mom a couple of times and you got her to move closer to you. Was that a big challenge?
Yeah.
I mean, she's from Milwaukee. She lived there all her life.
Born and raised in Milwaukee. She was holding the hand of my dad when he passed away. I was there as well. So we had that story. And I mean, I knew, like, after the funeral, I couldn't have the conversation.
No, right.
Boy, did I want to, because I knew, and she again. So it was, to answer your question, dad passed away in July of 2016. It wasn't until the global pandemic that shut down the world 4 years later, even though many conversations, some of which I did not handle well because I was highly emotional. I did not want us to be making long distance moving conversations in crisis. I've always tried to be proactive in all these years to try to get in front of issues before they become crisis. Millie, my now 95-year-old mother, Millie wasn't having it back then. So it was when the world shut down. She had 2 remaining children within 20 miles. She didn't see them. Her neighbors, who are also boomers, lovely, like I said, to this day, still in touch with them. They were taking her grocery shopping. They were helping. It's not that my siblings, if they ever see this, they would not like this presentation of them. My brother helped, but he would drop a grocery like twice or 3 times. He put the groceries outside of her door. So all I'm visualizing is my 91-year-old mom has to pick that up. I mean, it still wasn't ideal. So all that to say, I get a phone call maybe 6-7 weeks into the pandemic. It's telling me, Ellen, I've sold my car to Carolyn, one of the neighbors. I'm ready to move. Okay, now she has sold her car. So now the clock is ticking, because this is a woman that was still driving. Wow. It was, thank God my career began back there, because I had to help facilitate the sale of this home with a realtor I had met back in those days who specialized in senior moves. I reached out to him. We had a Zoom meeting with him. we signed him. I had to fly back home. We signed him. Mom got engaged with this realtor who specializes in senior moves. We had to start to get the house ready, and voila, she got four all cash offers on the first day. So by October, she was moving, and she relocated here October 12th.
Well, I'm glad to hear that she's there with you, but clarify or edify me. What does it mean to be a senior move specialist? What do we have to think about with that?
Yeah, well, he's someone that I knew for so many years, and he's not, his particular company isn't exact senior move management. I know many more of them now, even in my local market. They help facilitate the move, so they can help pack your stuff up. They can order the trucks. They can get get your stuff there. They kind of handle all the details. If you want some stuff to go to Goodwill, if you want some stuff to stay behind for a family member, that's what that part is. The gentleman that he did all that, but he also was a realtor. So he had even a heightened, he really helped us. I'm sure there's senior move managers that have figured that out, that helps them too, because then you are a one-stop shop. So I had this benefit, he's back in Milwaukee, of this one-stop shop where not only could he list my mother's house, but then he had the move managers that were on his staff. And so we signed that contract. We were able to sell the house, pack the house, take stuff to donation. I mean, it was, and that was happening. That was happening while I was long distance. I
can't imagine trying to downsize a house that she lived in for 60 years.
Well, she was in a condo now. They'd already moved, so this wasn't
the house downsized it. Okay,
but it was but make no mistake, it still wasn't easy. To your point, yes.
Yeah, I bet. So when your dad got sick and all of this, did you know anything about the insurance industry and Medicare and Medicaid and how did you go about getting some of that covered?
Well, so he, through his job, they were already Medicare, well into Medicare, qualified, obviously. And he had a supplemental, which to this day, I'm her person now. So they had good insurance. They really did have good insurance. I didn't, and I'm blessed. My parents were able to private pay for things that, they didn't, that weren't covered. If there was such a thing.
Yeah, because they probably didn't have long-term care insurance.
They did not. Now, I will tell you, there came a point, while dad is still alive, I'm long distance, mom is there. There did come a point where she knew that it was too much for her. And his journey was transitioning. And there was a point that she was decided to put him in a brand new, he was literally the fourth person that moved in there, back in there where they lived, 2 miles from their home, just had been built. It still had the new car smell, and it was memory care only. So it was a specific for his situation. He was the fourth person to move in there. He lasted 3 weeks and his life journey ended. Yeah. And I was, like I said, I was there. But that being said, that was private pay. And we were looking, and this is 2016. We were already well into the 7,000 plus at that point for 3 weeks. So to your point, I knew they could afford that. I now had a better picture of what was going on. But I knew this is where things got really tight, Wendy, because when you have two parents and mom she was still doing water aerobics in the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, before she moved here. So she was able to rebound after those 4 years of heavy duty caregiving, and she got her swagger back. But at that time, I'm trying to make decisions like, okay, this is $7,200 a month, and I'm looking at their finance. How long can this go so that she can live and not be destitute when this is over?
Right.
Those were things that were happening in my head, and I was starting to try to figure out what that game plan would be like. But
so did you get assistance with that, Ellen? Did you get financial assistance with figuring out how to manage that? Did you get emotional assistance for yourself? I mean, I guess I'm asking, as an adult child, what kind of help do we need to help us get through this?
I'm not yeah. To this day, my siblings have no idea how anything got paid for, so I don't have, how I can answer that is, number one, you really do need to have some sort of a picture. And I know these things are overwhelming. The one thing I will say you have to also know is I'm in this business too. So not only am I a child dealing with it, but professionally, I'm the operator helping other families move into our buildings that I'm involved with. So I have the insight and the knowledge of what it takes. Now, does it still mean it's not? And my mom, true story, my mom is a former accountant, so she's good with numbers too. And there came a point, especially after Dad's passing, and as we were prepared to sell her home, she just opened the books and let me have at it. So it really, I managed our own household budget. And again, there was, in our situation, I'm very blessed. There was money that, I mean, it's not going to be indefinite. We're not bajillionaires, but
Right.
they had squirreled away enough that Mom is, you know.
So when you get people coming to you that are, you know, dealing with their parents and their health care and their move and all, like, what would be 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give to them as they're starting this journey?
Number one, to what you said before, and to my philosophy, you have to have the team. I know people are going to get worked up about the fact that too bad my team doesn't come from my immediate family. Make no mistake, I have shed many tears about that along the journey. But now I'm so many years into it. And quite frankly, my husband said something at one point, you know what? You got to get over that they're not on your team, because quite frankly, when they are on the team, it sets us back many steps. And so I have found a way to move on. But that being said, you still have to have your team. If you are blessed enough, it could be your sister, your cousin down the block, your grandma, or whatever, whoever it can be, neighbors, clergy, women from the women's group, whatever the team looks like. There's no one size fits all. Your team has to work for you. So you have to know that you can't do it alone. When Mom was alone back in Wisconsin, I did encourage her to get a housekeeper. That was another bridge too far. She didn't want to do it, but she did agree to it for once a month. I was getting baby steps with her because, again, there was things that was happening that she needed some help with as we got close to her moving here.
Yeah.
So get your team in place, number one. Number two, absolutely proactively think about, be proactive. Try to be 2 steps ahead. You made reference to the safeguarding of the home. When my dad was still alive and my mom was his caregiver back in that condo back in Wisconsin, and he had a shuffle gait and was walking now with a rollator, the rolling, walker, that bear rug in the family room had to go. The rug in the entryway, it was a low pile, but still his walker could get stuck on that coming over the lip of the door. All things that seem so simple. You cannot believe, if you are hearing me and you start to think about fall trip hazards, too much clutter, too much spoiled food, if you start to eliminate and get in front of where you're starting to see, oh, they're getting up in the overnight multiple times to go to the bathroom, let's make sure there's motion lights so that when Dad got out of bed, that motion light popped on and he had a pathway to the bathroom. Something so simple, you are really extending the life of the success, especially of movement, for your loved ones in your home. Whatever their situation is, whether there could be diabetes, obesity, whatever it is that could cause some problems. Now they're shrinking because of osteoporosis, but everything I have to reach to top shelves, let's move that stuff down. Let's reconfigure. Try to look at the space where your elders are living with a very discerning eye and look for all the hazards. You don't want it to happen, but you're trying to figure out what I'm talking about. So that's number two. Try to make their existing living environment as safe as possible so they can stay there safely as long as possible. And number three, give yourself some grace. To your point with the woman you talked about on the front end, and everyone wants to do it all. You're going to have to offload some stuff. You're going to have to pay. You have to be okay paying if you can. And there are if finances are an issue, right, there are ways around that as well. But you're going to need some outside services.
Yeah. And June reminds us that the area on age, what is it? area
The
agencies
Agency on Aging.
on
Yeah.
aging are very helpful, at least as far as the resources that they can provide.
Yeah. No, I swear by them. I
Yeah,
swear by
yeah. So this has been very helpful. And if you want to know more about what Ellen is doing with the dementia training and educational resources that she has, you can find all of that on her website, keepinmindinc.com, which I will also put in the show notes. And she also said you can email her at ellen.belk@keepinmindinc.com. And yes, June, she did mention that anesthesia seems to be a real concern for seniors, particularly as we get older and older, the impact of that. So yeah. Ellen, this has been great. I have appreciated all of the comments that everybody has shared with us. So many takeaways. I'm going to have to work on pulling all of this together to make it so people can find all of this. So much. Thank you so much. Let me remind you about our new sponsor, My CareLink 360. And you can find all of the things that they offer by going to mycarelink360.com/ref/boomer, and then enter the word boomer all in lowercase at checkout to get 5% off of that. And also, please, when you're thinking about travel, go check out Road Scholar. Go to road, ROAD, scholar.org/heyboomer and plan your next trip. All right. So next week, we've been talking about caregiving for the last 4 weeks, I think it is. Really been helpful, impactful conversations. I appreciate all of the guests we've had on. Next week, we're shifting gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about how things change in our relationships as we get older, particularly around some of the longer term relationships. So next week, we're going to start that series by talking about something we probably don't want to think about, but gray divorce seems to be, that means divorce for people over 55, 60 seems to be on the rise. And so I contacted a woman, Dr. Eleanor Robin, who is an expertise in the area of personal and professional relationship conflict. She is also a divorce mediator, which means you can actually have a friendly divorce, low conflict divorce. So I'm looking forward to introducing you to her and some of the ways that you might resolve conflict and maybe not even get to the divorce. That's what we hope. Okay, so each episode of Hey Boomer is an invitation to listen, learn, and apply the wisdom gained from the episode to your own life. The path ahead may not always be easy, as Ellen was describing, but it's traveled best with support and shared insights. Ellen, thank you so much. My name is Wendy Green. I am your host for Hey Boomer, and the music at the front end was written and performed by my grandson, who is a student at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts.